I would like to start today's episode with a quote of the Austrian-American author Peter Drucker, who said that the most important thing in communication is hearing what isn't said. Today, we want to focus on those things that aren't said, the demeanor and nonverbal clues. Also, we will address how one can learn listening to these things that aren't said and probably also using them yourself. The expert who will address these and other questions is Bibi Badejo. It's our pleasure to welcome you, Bibi. Bibi is Joint Deputy Head of Chambers at Forbrick Court, specializing in children's public law cases with expertise in forensic preparation, effective witness handling, and complex expert evidence. She is recognized by peers and clients alike for her calm yet commanding courtroom presence, and is described, which perfectly fits for today, as a compelling advocate with a serene demeanor by the Legal 500 in its latest version, 2025. Bibi is also a recognized leader in advocacy training nationally and internationally. She is, for example, an accredited advocacy trainer at Inner Temple. As the founder of the Advocacy Coach, she has trained trial lawyers from over 20 countries, delivering workshops and online courses aimed at enhancing their courtroom skills. Her internationally acclaimed The Advocacy Podcast provides additional practical advice for experienced trial lawyers. You are all warmly invited to check this out. Without further ado, I would like to hand over the mic to you, Bibi.
Thank you so much, Ilka, and hello to everybody. Thank you very much for coming. Now, I'm going to be talking to you about demeanor and non-verbal cues. And the first thing I want to do is just pose this question. Have you ever seen an advocate lose a case before they've even opened their mouth? I have. I have seen it, and that's because of their demeanor. So demeanor isn't just about looking professional. It's about exuding authority, credibility, and control. I'm really excited to talk to you about demeanor and nonverbal cues in law. And also what I'll be doing is sharing some practical tips that you can put into action straight away. Now, you might not need every single one, but if it's just one that resonates with you, it's likely to make a difference in your performance in the courtroom or the hearing room. I think that the soft skills of advocacy are very important, but when I was a much less experienced barrister, I found that they weren't necessarily taught. Now, some of them are very obvious and you can adopt them by watching, but others are incredibly subtle and you need to have a level of awareness in order to identify them. And then you need to deconstruct them so you understand what they are, why they work, and then how you use them. And sometimes it can be as simple as silence and understanding the effect of silence and those kinds of soft skills there. So the way I thought I would address this topic, which is really interesting for me, is just to take you through a few areas of self-awareness and then go through to persuasion and being able to use demeanor and non-verbal cues to your strategic advantage. So the first thing that I'm going to talk to you about is first impressions. It's essential that you master your presence. People judge you within seconds, and that can be based on your posture, eye contact, how you carry yourself. It all sets a tone. And what you must do as advocates, as effective advocates, is actually decide, how am I going to present myself to the court? It can't be an afterthought, and even worse, it can't be something that you didn't even think about. I thought about this, especially having interviewed a silk, so that's King's Counsel, called Carl Heaton. And this was for the Advocacy Podcast. He's now His Honour Judge Carl Keaton in Australia, in Queensland. And he spoke about how particular he is. From the moment he steps into the courtroom, he's thinking about how people are perceiving him. So for him, he's incredibly organised. He strips down everything in the sense of he only will have his laptop and maybe a notepad and a pen. He doesn't have oodles of things. He has an incredibly neat desk so that when the jury come in, when the judge sees him and his opponent sees him, and even the public, they know that he's someone that means business just by being neat and looking tidy, prepared, and organized. So have that in mind, and let's compare that with the advocate who rushes in with their coat, has to unpack, get themselves together. It just doesn't work. And this is no criticism, by the way, to the advocate who rushes in with their coat. I have been that person, and I know the difference of how I was looked at when I was a bit more, I think, how would I describe it? Yeah, a bit more unorganized to when I came actually thinking about it and being a lot more intentional. So when we think about this, what we want to do is add credibility for the court and also for the witness. And by the way, if I say court, also have in mind I'm also meaning hearing room as well. And if I say tribunal, I'm including arbitrators in that too. So when we are thinking about how the tribunal and witnesses are going to think about us, you need to have that in mind. You have to do it intentionally. So one of the things that you might want to do is, let's look at an action, is actually plan your initial court entry. Have a think about how you want to be perceived first. What do you want your tribunal to think about when they see you? Do you want to be someone who can be trusted? Well, of course we all do. Yes, that's a given. Someone who's credible. What does a credible advocate look like? Have a think about that and then act in that way. So think about the way that you're going to step into the courtroom. Also think about your setup. Like, are you going to be like me? So disclaimer here, I have 2 screens and a keyboard and a notepad and paper. How am I going to bring that in and try and look like I'm not flouncing and, completely underprepared? How'd I do that? I might just think, okay, I'm just going to have a bag and then I will silently put my things instead of piling them all up in one, because that doesn't work either. The other thing for you that I'd like you to think about is to decide on your first 30 seconds of your interaction with the tribunal. Now, the first 30 seconds, remember, we're talking about first impressions here. So what are you going to say? How are you going to say it? Do you need a drink of water before? Do you need to clear your throat? Do you need to have a bit of a practice outside? Have a think about all those things, because if you get up with fillers, stuttering, stumbling over your words, that opportunity to give that powerful first impression has gone. Also, remember what I said about Carl. He was already thinking about how everybody in the court is going to think about him. So not just the courtroom, but also the common areas of the court building. So the moment you step in, you are being watched and observed and you're being judged in a way. So have a think about that. Now, the next topic I want you to think about is commanding space. Once we've made that good impression, we want to maintain it, but we also want to build and build on it. And so the way we are able to command space is through confidence. And you have to project confidence. And even if you don't feel it, you must behave as if you do. Your body, I promise you, will lead your mind. So here are a few tips that I can give you to help you with that. Think about your pace. When people start talking really, really quickly, it's really hard to follow. They're not really breathing. It sounds like they are worried and nervous. And I sped up just to convey that. They sound unsure. You will sound unsure if you rush your words. But they're those people who speak slowly and they pause. This means that they look like they're deliberate and in control as well. And a bit of a cheat code for people who speak really quickly is perhaps use the pauses to slow you down. So if you are speaking quickly and you realize that, just think, okay, I'm going to take a break here. The breaks are never, ever as long as you think they are. Even if you were to pause for 1 second, let's go 1 second, and then move on, it feels really long for you, but it isn't for anybody else. So embrace those pauses. The next thing you should do is maintain eye contact. That gives authority. And I thought it was really interesting because last year I did some marshalling, and marshalling is where you sit with the judge next to them and above everybody else, watching the other advocates. And I was astonished as to the number of advocates that didn't even look the judge in the eye. I was thinking, who are you speaking to? Because they were looking down at the papers. There was this little bit just underneath the judge's desk where they were looking at. It was not persuasive. It was not engaging at all. So you want to be able to give that eye contact. And I'm not saying it's an aggressive engagement or anything like that. No, no, no. Just as you would in a conversation, just have a look and look into their eyes. What that also does is it means that you will be able to gauge how they're responding as well and adjust accordingly. Also, what we can do is use gestures and hand movements. And what you may have been told is, because maybe hands have been flapping around, you may have been told, hold on to a pen, put your arms behind your back, hold on to a lectern. I never, ever, ever say that to anybody. And the reason for that is this: it builds up tension in your body. It's so unnatural. Like, nobody holds a lectern, nobody holds it onto a table when they are speaking. And what we do instead is we use our gestures. And you can see, you might not be able to see all of my hands here, but you'll notice that I move them. I move them naturally. And I can also move them purposely. So if I was talking about topic X and then moving to Y, perhaps I'm going 1, 2, 3 in terms of my points. Think about the gestures that you're using. What it does is it makes it a lot more natural and authentic, so people can trust you. The other added thing to that is also the communication that you're giving. It starts to become a little bit more conversational and natural. And I have found that advocates that I look up to and who inspire me are the ones that seem as if they're saying to the tribunal, let me explain why you should decide for my client. These are the reasons. And it sounds very professional. It sounds formal, but it's conversational. And they've been able to embody everything they have during a conversation and import it into a hearing room or a courtroom. And that's really persuasive. So super subtle, but it's something that people take in and think, oh, okay, I can trust you. You know what you're talking about. And that's where we're able to command the space. And another thing that I am going to do is just to give you a few tips on how to identify the patterns, because of course, if you don't know that you're doing something, you're not going to be able to change it. An example of this was I discovered that I had this incredibly weird habit of speaking a sentence, going straight into the next sentence, running out of breath, having a breath in the middle of a sentence, and then carrying on. And it was just this horrible cycle. So the way that I was speaking was really disjointed and broken up, completely unpersuasive. And no one told me. Now, I had been on training. I've trained all over the place, and no one said anything because they thought, that's just a little thing. I don't need to go into that. But when I listened to it for myself, it was something that I thought, this needs to change. And so I did. And the way that I did that was doing a self-audit. So this is the next action for you to take on, which is a self-audit. So the first thing that you can do is to perform a piece of advocacy and record it. Okay. I know it's horrible. I hate looking at myself. I hate hearing it. But this is something that you're going to have to do for you to actually understand and be a lot more self-aware. So record yourself delivering some advocacy. It doesn't have to be long. 5 minutes, that'll probably be fine. Then what I want you to do is watch the video only. Turn the sound down. No sound, put it on mute, and just watch yourself. Look at your face. What are those facial expressions that you're making? Look at your body language. Are you swaying? Are you slouching? Or do you like what you see? Because if you like what you see, you can lean into that more and do more of that. Write down what you've noticed. The next thing that you can do is listen to it again, but audio only. So perhaps put the phone down so that you're just listening, turn it up, put some earphones or headphones on, and really listen to how you sound. Do you sound confident? If you don't, what makes you not sound confident? Explore that as well. Again, note things that you like, note things that you don't like. What's about your tone? Is it like one tone? Does it sound a bit boring? Do you need to inject some life into it and some energy? Do we look at emphasis and changing how we're going to be speaking? You're not going to know that unless you listen. And then the final thing that you can do is read a transcript. And that is quite revealing. Leave all the filler words in. the ums are, well, I know, we do a lot of knows in England. So have a listen. Oh, sorry, have a read of the transcript and it will start coming to you, because when you read and when you hear, you get different senses. And these are things that you can change by taking action. Just you're now aware of what it is that doesn't work for you. Take an action in order to change it. The third area that I want you to think about now is reading your opponent. This also applies to your tribunal, but I'm going to stick with your opponent for now. And what I'm asking you to do is to decode your opposing counsel's demeanor. If you know them from before, which sometimes that's the case, you come across people all the time, you can have previous meetings as perhaps a yardstick and use it to see how they're behaving now. For example, are they confident or do you think they're bluffing? Notice when they're hesitating. Look for if they are normally still, but now they're fidgeting. It might not be that obvious, but if you can see a level of discomfort in their tone, perhaps they're reacting emotionally, then that's probably a weak area in their case. So all these nonverbal cues are telling you so much. Think about contradictions. If what they're saying and the way their body is behaving don't align, highlight it. You might even want to be brave enough to say, well, you're saying that you're confident in this part of your argument, but you're hesitating every time you're trying to explain it. That would send me off if someone said that to me. And it may not even be something that you say, but just take a note and matching up how they're behaving in particular areas or topic or issues within your case as well. So really important things for reading your witness, because that can also adjust what you're going to be doing as well. But we're not reacting, we're going to be responding and being conscious of all the different pieces of information that we're getting from their behavior and the nonverbal cues. Listen out for things that they are not answering. So perhaps the tribunal has asked them a question and maybe they haven't answered it fully. Pay attention to what they're avoiding. Pay attention to when they're giving their submissions. What aren't they answering? That speaks volumes and often indicates a weaker point. So you may want to go in for the attack in that way. Sometimes it may be that you just want to put pressure on them, and you can do that by you coming across as super prepared and noting where they are not. So how do we put this into action? It's fairly simple, I have to say. It's really about just watching. So you don't focus on the speaker, observe the people around them. In casual conversations, in the formal addresses within the court, see how others are also reacting to what they are saying. If it was in front of a jury, are jurors exchanging glances? Is the judge or arbitrator raising an eyebrow? These things can be incredibly telling. So if you're on your feet, you might not be able to do this. I would say try and expand your peripheral vision and try and take a note of what's happening. However, if you can't do that, just have someone else, give someone else that brief that that's what they're going to do so that they can notice and then they can feed back to you as well. The fourth area that I want to highlight for your attention is understanding your witness. And it's really important that you know that you cannot have a blanket approach to witnesses. Now, what I've been told, and this is true, cross-examination is not examining someone crossly. We know that we're going to be calm, but that doesn't mean you're always going to approach them in exactly the same way. In the same way that you're reading your opponent, you're going to be reading things about your witness. And that can be from statements, how they are spoken about, even your own observations in the interlocutory hearings. So gather information, store it, and start trying to figure out how they are as a person. Now, you can't get into their heads, so this is not going to be concrete. It's not at all absolute. But really what you're trying to do is get an impression so that you can start shaping your questions and your submissions around each of the witnesses. Are they always on time? Do they argue with people? Do they fly off the handle? This is all going to be information that's very, very important for you, and you will act accordingly. Now, I have an example to give you. I had a case where I was for a local authority. So remember, I do care proceedings. And as the local authority, what we were saying is that these two children cannot live with their mother and father because they will come to harm. So in addition to the local authority, I have the mother as a party, the father as a party, and also the guardian who represents the children and advocates on their behalf. Now, there were issues of abuse between the parents, and I was just trying to think, how am I going to deal with this? The mother was a fairly quiet person. Sometimes she would cry, and I thought, I can't go too hard because that might invoke sympathy with the judge. But the father was a really brash individual. I thought, okay, well, I know that I need to be quite firm with him. So these were the beginning thoughts of how I was going to deal with them as witnesses. However, it didn't end there. And it also didn't start at my cross-examination preparation. I knew that from reading the papers, and I thought, oh, okay, what I want to do is I want this man to underestimate me. I don't want him to realize that I'm an effective advocate, and I want him to have a full sense of security when he goes into that witness box. So I was generally very quiet. I said what I needed to say, but I wasn't particularly overbearing in any way. Now, the order is in context of this was that the mother would give evidence first and then the father would. So I just asked a few questions of her, just around some of the issues. I didn't really press her too hard, to the point that the guardian, so remember, person number 4 who represents the children, was furious with me. She didn't think that I was putting the case properly. She thought that her barrister would have to come and mop up because I had messed up so badly, but she didn't realize what my strategy was. I had all the information that I needed to get from the mother, and I could get that very calmly, softly, and matching her energy, if I can put it in that way, that when it came to the dad, my first question knocked him and he wasn't able to recover. And the reason for that was I went for inconsistencies, showed him how he was a liar. He was on the back foot from the very beginning because he just wasn't expecting it. He thought he would just be able to walk this. She's not very good, doesn't matter. So that's an example of how taking on board nonverbal cues, demeanors from the witnesses, and other bits of information have been able to shape my strategy from quite an early stage when it comes to me asking questions. The other thing that I should also point out is while we are very much aligned with our clients, an objective person might not be. So I have found often it feels like the judge hates my client. I believe my client, but the judge hates them, or they really like the other side. So how am I going to adjust and still put my case forward, but take into account the way the judge is likely going to respond as well as the witness? So in terms of action points for you, prepare a witness profile. So I have a few questions that I can put out that you can, ask yourself. Think about what your primary goal is with this witness. Is this someone that you're going to be using to undermine the other side, or do you need to undermine them? Think about what their likely emotional state might be. And you might not know the answer, but have a think. Could they be fearful, defensive, or maybe they'll be cooperative, and that can really work in your favor as well. Think about their communication style. Are they rambling? Are they really concise? Are they hesitant? And then think about their predictable triggers. What do you think would get them stressed? What do you think they might exaggerate about? You might also want to put yourself in their shoes and think about what facilitated their decisions or what could have influenced their account. Maybe there's some misunderstandings that you can clarify, or maybe you can use that again to undermine them. And again, just take on board the impressions that you get from reading their statements and think about also what impression you want your tribunal to have of this witness, because that's also important. So if I want to show you up as someone who is not a credible witness because you've just made a mistake, or you're not a credible witness because you're a liar and you're incredibly dishonest, I might have two different ways that I'm going to approach that. So have a think about that too. Now, moving on to the final area, which is controlling the witness. Once we put all of this together, you're going to be more likely able to own that courtroom space and control the courtroom. So when you're engaging with witnesses, move deliberately. Don't start swaying from side to side. Don't start twiddling things around and looking nervous. Be in control. A thing that I may offer to you that I do is I notice that I sometimes stand on one leg, not stand on one leg, but lean on one side. So what I do before I start is I might move from side to side and then center myself. I'll take a deep breath. I will take my time and then I will start. So I start sounding powerfully. You can use your expressions strategically. So maybe you want to raise an eyebrow because you've heard an implausible statement. Or maybe they've said something incredible, and this is a time that you look at your tribunal and look back at them. This signals its importance. You can also control the tempo. If the witness starts speaking quickly, you can slow them down by you slowing down and introducing your silences and your pauses. You can also do this, which is great. If someone is going on and on, you don't even need to say, oh, hang on, can you wait a second? You can just put your hand up. And people will stop if you do that to them. Or if they're not answering the question that you want, you can start shaking your head. And maybe you do this. Silence. That wasn't the question I asked you. I asked you this, and that you're just in control there. So these non-verbal communications can be incredibly effective in terms of controlling witnesses, commanding presence, and being the most effective advocate that you can be. So those are the 5 tips that I have for you, or 5 areas with tips that I have for you. Definitely, if there are any questions, please let me know. And that's my presentation for today. Thank you.
First of all, thank you so much, Bibi. That was an impressive round through starting, kind of entering the room, the courtroom or the hearing room, until having the witness in front of you. That was very impressive. Thank you so much. We already do have a first question within the chat. Janine, do you want to turn on your mic, or do you want someone from us reading out your question?
No, sure, I'm happy. Hi, and thank you so much. That was really interesting. So my question pertains to, I think that was the second area, the arms, and all the filling words that we often use. So particularly when I feel that I start to get nervous, I try to focus more on the content than on the delivery. And then I think not just with me, but also with other persons, then all these filling words tend to slip in. Do you have a practical tip how we can avoid that?
Yes, I do. I can give you several and then you can choose what works for you. But the first thing that I do want to say is that ums are natural. There are people, I might not have through my presentation, but I am, and also secret. When I'm doing the advocacy podcast, there are silks, incredibly esteemed, experienced people, and they all the way through some of their answers. So it is something that's natural. So don't worry about getting rid of all of them. Some people do say if you just write or whatever it is at the top of your paper and cross it out, that's a visual reminder for you to do so. Other people say pinch yourself after you say, or just as you're about to. And that can also be a reminder. I think that that's cruel, never works for me, hated it. But the most effective way that I have found is just be conscious of what your sentence is. And the reason for it is this. We usually because we've run out of breath and we don't know what we're about to say next. But if you know what your sentence is, just say your sentence. Okay, so it's really about just taking a breath if you can and speaking your sentence. And when you get to the end of the sentence, stop, then go on to your next sentence. And that usually gets rid of all the ums and ahs, because what you'll find is you're thinking and umming. And what we want is to have that thought process and then just say your sentence. So if you start slowing down using silences, it enables you to have that space to A, think, also B, breathe, and then you can carry through that sentence without umming and ahhing. So have a practice of that and see how the slowing down, introduction of pausing, which again gives you more authority. I think there's so much gravitas in someone being able to be confident enough to just pause, slow down, and then carry on. I think that usually, I found it just wipes it out for me. So I hope that's helpful, Janine.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you.
Let's give it a try.
Thanks, Bibi and Janine. Do we have more questions? Mihaela.
I have a question which is kind of related to the one Janine's. What should we do when we feel like we've just lost the train of thought? We start to say something and then our ideas just disappears and we freeze. How can we overcome it?
I think what you can do is just be honest, because it happens to everybody. And this is the thing about authenticity. If you don't put pressure on yourself to try and remember it, and you just say, I've just lost my trail of thought. If I could just have a moment and take that moment, you could literally just stand for 30 seconds and have a think. Or if it's not coming to you after that, say, I did have a point, it escapes me. I'd like to come back to that. And hopefully as you go on to something else, it's randomly going to pop up and come back. But what it does is it shows that you're still in control. And whilst this thing that happens to the rest of us, it didn't, knock you off your stride or anything, you can still continue engaging. And more often than not, it will come back to you. So that's how I would deal with it. It's going to happen at some point. Don't worry about it. Acknowledge it. And just create that space so that you can come back to it or you have time to think.
Thank you. And if I can ask another question, since I'm here having the floor, how much time do you invest in preparing for your advocacy? Like if you were to say, I don't know, 20% of my time is preparation and rehearsals and so on, because we understand the value of it.
That's such a good question. Right. How would I divide it?
Because when we see it natural.
Okay. So I think in terms of my preparation, I spend about 50% of the time on my case analysis. I spend a huge amount of time, 50 to 60%. I'm thinking about my case from lots of different angles. And the reason why I do that is once I'm clear on where I'm going, then I can get my message through. And what I also found is once I'm clear on that, I can then prepare, like write it up, and then I can practice. I maybe spend about 10% of my time practicing. Sometimes I don't get that chance. So in family law, I might finish course at 4:30, get home at 6. I have papers for the next day and they're over 1,000 pages, and that's going to be happening throughout the week. So I don't get time to practice. So what I focus on is understanding what the message is that I want to convey. And then I might have a practice. If I have time, I'll practice it. And what that does is I can start refining and taking things out that I don't like, or maybe I wrote something and it's actually a tongue twister that doesn't sound very good and I can't say the word. So that's going. So I will do a bit of a practice there. Now, cheat code is nail your first 30 seconds and your last 30 seconds. So I will always have time to say my first 3 lines 3 times. And what that does is when I've done this, moved around, I've taken a deep breath, and then I'm able to just deliver, give eye contact, deliver my first 3 lines and be engaging. And then everything tends to fall into place. Now, because I know through my case analysis, I know my case really well, I know what the message is. It might not be exactly the same as what I have written or what I have prepared, but what I know is that I'm going to be consistent in conveying the message for each of my points there. And then when we get towards the end, because I know what my last lines are going to be, I can deliver that with force as well. And as a package, I think just makes for a lot more effective advocacy. So if you can, definitely practice, say it out loud. Don't be worried about getting the exact sentences every time. Like, don't worry about that. And then what that also means is that you don't need to read your notes. You can just speak. Instead, have eye contact and be a lot more engaging. So I hope that helps in terms of how I prepare, but that's what I do.
It does. Thank you.
No problem.
Very interesting to hear that, Bibi. Do we have more questions? Otherwise, I do have some as well. In the meantime, probably I just use the floor. Bibi, you spoke about witnesses and how it was very interesting to hear your case on the mother and the father and how you actually treated both differently. What if a witness is your witness in terms of he or she is supporting your case, and that person, as you know, is anxious and insecure, but you know that he or she is truthful and you really need the message from that person. How do you deal with that, and how do you create a comfort zone for the witness? Because I would guess that's what it might be that is important.
Right. So there's several things. Just one thing that I want to clarify. If they are helpful witness, is that my witness, as in I would do examination in chief, or I'm cross-examining?
Exactly. Yeah. No,
Okay.
your witness.
All right, my witness. So I will always speak to my witnesses before, and I'll start gauging whether or not they're going to be a disaster on the witness stand and look at how I can support them. So I'll have that information before. And then what I think is really important is that, of course, you're going to be really pleasant to them. So I don't think I need to raise that. You will be pleasant and warm, etc. That's fine. But what you need to do, I think, it's your questions as opposed to demeanor and nonverbal cues. So be really clear when you're going to a specific topic. Now I'm going to ask you about X. So it's a leading way. It's not a question, but now they're like, okay, this is what we're talking about. Then don't ask questions that are too open. Never say to someone, well, can you tell the court what happened? Because they're like, oh my God, I'm going to mess up. I don't know. And then they're just all over the place. So what you want to do is still ask open questions, but what you do is introduce context. So maybe it's the time that we're going to be talking about, or a place, or a person. Start introducing context so it becomes narrower, and then they'll be able to follow you, because otherwise there'll be rabbits in headlights. So use your questions as a guide by dropping in clues through the context. You're not leading in any way, but what you're doing is giving them an ability to anchor their answer based on your question and actually deliver that. Also, by keeping it concrete and factual, that's helpful. That would be helpful as well. Use documents where you can. So if they're struggling to remember a date and the date isn't crucial, like go to the document, help them out. Don't leave them floundering. More often than not, the dates don't matter for those kind of things, so that we can do them and assist them. So that's what I would think about doing for witnesses who are nervous, or I'm not sure are going to come to proof.
And if I may, what would be the difference when it is not your witness, but it's within the cross-examination, but still you are aware of the fact that what he or she is saying is important for your case?
Okay, so I think what's really great about cross is when we're doing leading questions, we're putting the answer in the question. So I'll just tell you and you're going to say yes. So it's just really easy. I make it concrete as possible. So what I mean by that is not abstract. I'm talking about, right, so you went to the train station. Yes, you got on the train. You traveled to this stop. You got off the train. These are sorts of things that it's really small, they'll be able to agree with, and I can just lead them all the way through. So if they're nervous and they're not sure, because I am asking them leading questions and the answer is embedded in the question, it's way easier than when they're your witness and you have to rely on them giving the answers in their own words. So actually, I love that.
Yeah. I can hear that. And if no one else wants, I do have a last question that came to my mind when you spoke about Carl in your first part of the presentation.
Yes.
It was very interesting to hear the role he wanted to, or the picture he wanted to convey, and the role he's really, I would probably say, playing in that moment. It's again not necessarily directly at demeanor and nonverbal clues, but do you have tips on how to actually find one's own role? So if I'm not yet certain what kind of advocate I want to be, do you have any tips on how one can figure that out?
Okay, yeah, sure. So I think there are two ways that you can go. One is to watch other advocates and see what you like. Like what really inspires you, what makes you think, I wish I could do that. Write that down, because that will be a value. So there's some people who are so articulate, they can use long words, but there are others that use really plain language, but they can convey exactly what they mean. And it's so clear. These are two different types of people. Which one do I want to be? So by observing others, and you are assessing them in your own mind, deciding what it is that you like and what you don't like, take that into account and think, maybe that's what I want to be. And for those who are, I would say, who have looked into it a bit more and they think, right, I wish I could be X type of advocate, have that in mind, and that's your intention. Then the next question is, how do I display that? And that's where the work starts coming in. So if you think I want to be the most helpful advocate to the tribunal, great. You've got work to do because you need to start reading. Your preparation needs to be incredibly tight. You need to be the person that the judge turns to as the source of assistance. And example, I think, was it last week? Last week? I think so. When I've been in court for most of this year. Where I made sure that I was the one that where the judge says, where's that reference? I'd have the answer. I'd, you know, as she's speaking, I don't know where it is. I am searching on my PDF. I'd be the one to find that because I want her to think of me as helpful, to the point where she would say, Miss Badejo, where's your iPad? Can I have your iPad, please, so I can watch this video? She would refer to me in order for me to provide that because that's what I had established for her. The other judges where I don't want to be that helpful person, maybe I just want to be an authority, or maybe I don't want to be so high profile. I just want to be trusted and have credibility. So even within that, depending on the judge, depending on my case and my client, I might just have a different way that I want to present. So I would say, just think about it for that case. Who do you want to be in that case? And go from there, as opposed to the advocate for the rest of your career, because that, I think that's a lot of pressure. Break it down.
Very good. Thank you so much.
No problem at all.
And I think that's a great end because you gave us so much to think about and so many tips, which are very helpful.